I'm very slow to, brand public figures as liars. In fact, I don't think I've ever called a public figure a liar, and I would be very slow to do that. But I will call out a lie. So if something is a lie, I will say it's a lie. But I'll be very slow to call someone a liar. And I noticed that the term was used by the Prime Minister to describe the leader of the opposition in their debate last Thursday. But that's between them. I wouldn't, say liar for public figures, because there's no way back from that. But I will say that you told a lie. And in my view, there were some zingers dropped then. I say that to say that I know that the hunt for political office calls for or motivates people to speak in a manner that has to make the picture look a certain way. Governments in power want the picture to look as rosy as possible. Opposition politicians want the picture to look as bad as possible. And in trying to achieve that mission, lies will be told. And what I was referring to in that moment on Friday morning was 2 or 3 things that I felt were egregious. The one was the 28 bank account.
What they know about you is that you have 28 bank accounts.
Lies, lies, lies.
The investigations carried out by the Integrity Commission are at an end. I am not currently under any investigation. There were no findings of corruption or charges. The leader of the opposition continues to try to weaponize these things because that is the only crutch he has to stand on.
I cringed when it came back and the opposition leader said it, because I'm saying, my God, who in Jamaica does not know that this is a lie? It is. And it was mentioned twice by him. And I know it is a lie because I wrote the story breaking down which account is for whom and everything. So I know. So that's one. The second one was when Mr. Robinson rose in the parliament to say he takes no issue with the salary increase to parliamentarians. And the opposition leader said, well, he wasn't referring to parliamentarian salary. That's not true. That's a lie. He was referring to parliamentarian salaries.
The PNP under your leadership has flip-flopped on a number of issues. For example, Julian Robinson on May 16, 2023 said the opposition takes no issue with the massive salary increase for parliamentarians. The very next day, the PNP released a statement objecting to the increase. Why should Jamaicans trust that you won't similarly make about turns on promises you are making now?
When Julian said that in Parliament, he was referring to the principle of parliamentarians getting an increase. He wasn't addressing the specifics of what was being proposed. We hadn't had a discussion around those specifics. When we looked at the details and we saw the massive increase that the Prime Minister was proposing for himself and for his ministers, we felt it was unconscionable to do that.
I have to call out that the leader of the opposition is telling lies. Julian Robinson stood in Parliament and said he supported the increase. Clear, and the tapes are there. Secondly, he calls the increase unconscionable, yet he takes it. I, Andrew Michael Holness, did not take it. The option was available to him as well. I chose not to take it.
Yeah? So those are the 2 egregious ones for me. On top of that, I've heard the opposition with this argument about 2 things. One, Mr. Bunting has taken to saying, and other members of the opposition, that the last 2 years under the Holness administration, in their move to decouple the government from the success in fighting major crime. So the opposition say it's only the police. I've never heard this before in my life, that a police in a country, democratically ruled, achieves successes and it has nothing to do with the government. But that's what the opposition say. Okay, so they've decoupled the government from that in their effort to say it's just the police alone.
It is true that for the last 6 or 7 months, there's been a significant reduction in murders in Jamaica. And I want to credit the Commissioner and the security forces for that reduction. But the fact is, for the 2 terms of the Andrew Holness administration, more Jamaicans have been murdered than in any other 2 terms in the history of Jamaica. That is failure. That is not success.
To say that the last 2 years, so it would be 24 and 23, more Jamaicans have been murdered under Holness's watch, or on Holness's watch and the JLP's watch, than any 2-year period before. That's not true. And I spent the weekend looking for the numbers, and I got a spreadsheet from the JCF with the numbers, and it will show that in 2023, the homicide number at the end of the year, and I have to stress number in the distance because some of those listening don't understand number different from rate. So they mix up murder rate and homicide number and run Ghana town and talk all kind of foolishness because they don't understand. So the homicide number at the end of 2023 was 1,405. At the end of 2024, it was 1,146. Simple addition, 6 and 5, 11, 1, carry 1, 4, 1, 5, so that's 51, 4, 1, 5, 5, so it's 2,551 for that 2-year period. And they say that in no 2-year period has more Jamaicans been murdered than those 2 years. They said the last 2 years of the Holness administration. Obviously not talking about this year because this year is on course to be a record, and I'll come to this year shortly. But I said that that's not true because when you go to 2004, 2005. 2004, 1,471. 2005, 1,674. Now, if I'm telling you that 1,405 and 1,146 under Holness is lower than 1,471 and 1,674, 2004, 2004, and 2005, then I don't need to add them up to show because one is over 3,000 and one is 2,551. And the graph I have here is from 2001 up to August 31 this year. Nicely spread out month by month. So the argument that in the last 2 years, more Jamaicans have been murdered under this administration than any 2-year period in any previous administration is a lie, because 2004, 2005 comfortably eclipses that. Where we are today, where murders and crime is concerned, and there are so many things I could have said this morning, but I have to pinch myself. Looking and living in an election campaign where nobody is talking about crime. Absolutely nobody is talking about crime. And for August this year, there were 53 people murdered. 53. That's the lowest August since 2001. So that's 24 years based on when the numbers started from this JCF graph. The lowest August in 24 years was just closed out 53 homicides. And since the start of the year, no month has passed 74. 74 January 2025 was the highest. February 2025, 49. That was a record for any month in any year in the last 24 years. March 66, April 46. Oh, lower than March, lower than February. So April was a new record at 46. May 53, June 56, July 62, August 53. So as things stand on this day in sports, 459 homicides have been recorded in the country to date. I know, again, as I said, the opposition say it has nothing to do with government. It's all police. I don't share that view. And I know many people don't share that view either. And it is a massive thing to me that the homicide chart can look like this, and even feel sheepish some way, acknowledging and raving over 459 Jamaicans being killed at this point, being murdered at this point in the year. But in context, it is something to acknowledge and something to feel positive about, to say that this is where we're going. The other thing that emerged from the debate that I said, what? And I regard as a lie. This issue of the food insecurity. Now, you heard the opposition leader in the news clip we played say that 55% of Jamaicans are food insecure.
55% of Jamaicans are suffering from food insecurity. That is what the United Nations says, the FAO, which is an agency of the UN, says. 55% of Jamaicans are not getting adequate nutrition. That is not consistent with prosperity or low poverty rates or low unemployment rates.
And I know the opposition leader knows the language very well, the English language, very, very well. So when he says that 55% of Jamaicans are food insecurity, I take him to mean that he's talking about the current condition, that today on this day in sports, yesterday, the day before, and the day before, and the days before, which is why he can say now are, and this is something the opposition says a lot. Is that true? Based on the United Nations, Latin America and the Caribbean Regional Food Overview of Food Security and Nutrition for 2024, the 55.1% quoted by the opposition leader was true for the period 2021 to 2023. That's when the study was done. That's when the data was collected. And the report on the 55% was for data captured during that period, 2021 to 2023. Now, I know that many experts in the language are listening to this and will listen to this. So I want them to tell me if data captured between 2021 and 2023 said something about that data. If over 2 years later, it is correct and appropriate to say are when representing to the findings taken over 2 years before. If you say yes, then I'd have to reorient my thinking and adjust my attitude. But for what I know, for what I was taught, basic school, infant school, primary school, high school, university. If you say something and you say are, 55% of Jamaicans are suffering from food insecurity, present continuous, then clearly you're talking about the prevailing situation and you couldn't be talking about data collected 2 years ago. So in my eye and in my mind, those things, not true. So you see, again, you do these things which can be verified. You refer to JCF official statistics. You go to the report about the food insecurity and you say that this said was not true. You mentioned the 28 bank accounts, which the whole world now knows is not true. These things came up and people will say, you highlight it because you are biased. You highlight the truth. You tell me, you give me accurate information because you're biased. Never in my life have I seen these things, but I'm seeing them now and I'm absorbing.